Hello, welcome. This video, we've got a chance to interview Dan Murphy, who is another board member of the Lean Agile Procurement Alliance. And without any further ado, I'd like Dan, could you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Yeah, sure. Dan Murphy. I'm out of Ottawa, Canada, which is the seat of the federal government here in Canada. And I've been around Agile for the better part of 20 years, around government for probably about 40, and met Mirko a few years ago at the Business Agility Conference in New York. And since then, I've been a pretty heavy-duty advocate of Lean Agile Procurement.
So that was your way in, by meeting Mirko at the conference, having a discussion. That's whetted your appetite, did it?
Yeah, well, the real thing that got me going into Lean Agile Procurement was, first of all, where I'm situated in Ottawa, Canada, where the federal government is, and you kind of have a ringside seat to large procurements and large procurements that fail. So I did like 10 years with IBM, 10 years with Cisco, where I was leading large bid teams, bidding into large bids in the federal government. And then I switched into consulting and picked up Agile and got into consulting in around 2005 and was helping create, author, and publish bids inside the government, going out to private sector. So I kind of been on both sides of that spectrum. And then after that, I met Mirko at the conference, and then it was like, wow, well, this is a significant opportunity. And when you look at government procurement, well, it represents, in most countries, it represents 10 to 15% of GDP. They're big numbers, like it's 40 billion or something in Canada with everything pulled together. So it's a big number. And the way they do procurement, well, let's just say there's lots of room for improvement. And the big picture number and opportunity is just huge. So it's just an untapped potential that hasn't been realized.
When you're talking big picture number, I'm sensing it's not just money we're talking about. There's also a factor of time, as well as compliance and flexibility as well, right?
Yeah, I'm just doing I've run some hypothetical numbers, and in a year's time frame, just hypothetically, big picture, you're looking at maybe 40, 50 years of time saving if Lean Agile Procurement were adopted across the board, just in the Canadian public service. And then there's probably a 2 billion just in the overhead cost of procurement itself. Okay, and these are indicative numbers based on if we did too few like this, and if we could bring it down to 3 months, and if we had pretty large adoption of a Lean Agile Procurement across the government, those kind of numbers we're looking at, like pretty significant. And not only that, the other part of it is the risk mitigation. So moving to Lean Agile Procurement, the biggest factor in public sector is risk mitigation, because we're not making any assumptions. In the traditional procurement approach and the traditional project approach, the assumption we're making in that approach is that we know everything up front. And that never was true. Let me just, I got a book here I got to show you. This is a book, I have to keep it on the bottom shelf of my bookshelf. It's this book here by Paul Emanuele. You can see how thick that is. I've earmarked some of the pages. This is a book, Canadian public sector, all public sector in Canada, legal procurement challenges and legal issues that have come up in Canada's history.
Okay. Wow.
And Canada was started in 1867. And the country was basically glued together with the National Railroad, which was a big project. And the National Railroad is the first case in this book. And so you can just see it. So so the legal piece of it is that, and this is the thing that we know everything up front. So the legal documents here say that we don't know everything up front. And there's recently been a study by a friend of mine, Sean Boots here, who said the average procurement overspend after contract award is 167% of the
Wow.
actual budget for the project, not the procurement, for the project. So
Yeah.
if the project was 100 million, they'd spend 167 million
Yeah.
over the life of that contract with things they didn't know that they had to do contract amendments on. And that number across the government was something like 26 billion over the 4 or 5 years
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
lifespan. Those are the big numbers. If you look at an incidence of lap, okay, well, we take it from 18 months down to 3 months, or 12 months to 3 months. Those are still big numbers, and we save 80% of the cost and all that kind of thing. And those are big numbers. But when you start extrapolating those
Yeah.
across, it impacts the GDP of countries. So,
And the net impact on that, on the citizen, is that their tax dollar, their tax pound, their tax euro is then spent more effectively, because you're not seeing that that mass wastage, right? That 67% above project valuation.
right. And I mean, you're absolutely right. And the other part of it is that the services would work. They would be usable. Okay. So, and the other thing that I find in public sector a lot is that there's an over focus on the project and there's an under focus on the service. So
Yes.
procurement is done as a subcomponent of a project. And 9 times out of 10, the only part of the service, the whole end-to-end service that the procurement is servicing is the provisioning part.
Yeah.
We're going to provision a cloud service. Okay, well, it's installed and it's ready for use. That's not a service. That's just an installation. We set up the lemonade stand.
Yeah. There's an asset sitting there that's not being used, right?
Right. Did you make any money on it? Was the lemonade any good? Did anybody buy it? Was, that kind of thing. There's no concept of service often, but the core function of government is to deploy services. Could you fill out your tax form?
Yeah.
And in addition to that, those services are getting changed and augmented in Parliament annually, easily, where we're going to make amendments to the tax law. There are huge changes in how the service is deployed sometimes. So all these things, and in Canada now with the tariffs and everything else, there's tremendous pressure on the government, and the current Prime Minister is really smart. He was former governor of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, and so he gets it, and his whole thing is on outcomes. So
Yeah.
now I really couldn't see any opportunity for Lean Agile Procurement here. With this government, there really is, because they want outcomes. They don't want to deliver on scope. So now there's a whole renewed interest in Lean Agile Procurement, and I'm getting a lot of interest and activity at all levels, from the political down to the implementation.
That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the UK, we've had almost a history of some projects that have just gone sideways, and we've spent billions and billions, and we haven't got anything. You may have heard of HS2. It's a high-speed railway in the UK, or meant to be. Nothing's happening, and they've spent tens of billions of pounds, and it's like a road to nowhere.
Right.
And the worst thing, when it comes to compliance, when we needed stuff quickly during the COVID outbreak, the government spent $9 billion, or no, between 7 and 9 billion on procuring equipment and materials. And because it was needed so quickly, due diligence wasn't followed, and they bought a whole lot of defective or useless masks and equipment. It was just like they just burnt something in the order of 7 to 9 billion pounds. It just evaporated.
Yeah, yeah, and they in government here they have a tremendous difficulty in articulating their needs, their problems, and their outcomes. So we have existing procurement vehicles in the federal government. One is I want to buy a title, I want to buy a transformation architect, or I want to buy an engineer to come in and do something. That's real easy. They go, or I want to buy an Agile Scrum Master. Okay, well, you have to have your Scrum certification. You have to have all these things. No
Yeah.
problem. They can do that. But they have another vehicle called solution-based procurement. And in solution-based procurement, they have to articulate their problem. And then based on the problem and the need, they ask for solutions to come forward. And that procurement vehicle hasn't really been used.
And
it's sitting on the sideline.
That's the essence of agility, though, is often we realize that we've got a direction of travel or a goal or a purpose we're aiming for, but we need to co-create that. And often, whilst we're on the adventure towards the goal, we'll figure out there's obstacles in the way, things we want to change, or we may even want to end up in somewhere different. But that emerges because what we're doing is so complex.
Exactly. They're complex problems, and there's a huge issue, probably in a lot of corporate organizations as well, of this thing that I refer to as stakeholder fragmentation. It's stovepipes, but basically your stakeholders are in different groups within an organization, and those groups have different intended outcomes, and those outcomes may not be aligned across the organization. So the stakeholder fragmentation thing is a big deal, and this is where the magic of the cross-functional team comes into play. If there's a cross-functional,
could you just explore that stakeholder fragmentation a bit more for me? I just want to make sure I've got it.
I could use the government terminology of there's a deputy minister reports to the minister. Then there's a set of ADMs, which are like vice presidents. They're assistant deputy ministers. And then the next tier down is director generals. And then there's directors. And then there's big hierarchical pyramid. And in that pyramid, if I'm under a specific ADM and I want to roll out a service, but my service is within the bounds of that ADM, I've got a good shot of making that happen. Because that ADM may have a single purpose in mind of what he wants to do with the organization, and it may be clearly articulated, it may not. So then I have a shot because I can pull together a team. That ADM can say, okay, we're pulling together a team to make this work. But if the bounds and the scope of the service and the delivery, and normally if you're doing projects and services, that's a whole different, because I got to pull together much broader spectrum of people to deliver a service. So now I may cross 4 or 5 ADMs, and in that case, or 4 or 5 VPs in corporate. In that case, I don't have control over what the guys do in the other ADMs groups or the other VPs groups, because they go, well, I got things to work on. I can't work on your thing. I'm working for my VP. I'm working for my ADM. So I love what you're doing, but and I'll come to the meeting. But I can't do the task because I got stuff over here I need to do. I'll get to it next month. And so you don't really have, so this is what I refer to as stakeholder fragmentation. You don't have a group that are aligned for a single purpose to solve a single problem or to create a single outcome that are aligned and that are prioritized around that outcome. These things in a hierarchical organization, when we do projects in Agile, like using Scrum, and we pull those teams together, I refer to that as a temporal transformation. That's a moment in time where that organization is transformed. And that is extremely important because that's like doing a transformation pilot. The way we do transformation is say we're going to do a transformation project. No, you do a project. And inside that project, you bring together a cross-functional team that can deliver the service end-to-end and create value. That's a transformation. But then after the initiative's over, they all go back into their stovepipes. They're back into stakeholder fragmentation. So, and I was having these chats with Mirko as well about, well, in the early days of Agile, we had DevOps. Pretty simple. Dev and Ops. Dev and Ops didn't, that was stakeholder fragmentation.
Yeah.
Dev and Ops. So we got over that. We did DevOps, and then all of a sudden this thing DevSecOps came along, and then FinOps appeared. When we do agile procurement, we're doing Dev, Sec, Fin, Procure, Product, Legal, Ops.
Yeah.
That's the transformation because we're pulling the organization together around a specific outcome that the organization wants to deliver, and that outcome is usually around delivering value to clients. So,
And that's easier to follow the breadcrumb trail back to the organizational strategic objectives, the core principles for the year. And if we can sustain that team and keep them functionally together, they're capable of delivering because there's no distractions.
exactly.
If we get that challenge that you mentioned earlier, where people have a limited capacity, and it's the old, what do they call it, the peanut butter problem. If you spread your peanut butter too thin, all you taste is bread.
Right.
That's what we see a lot in both government work as well as very large corporate work. People have got time to attend a meeting, but they're so busy attending all these meetings they haven't got any time to do any work. Whereas if we could get them on single dedicated teams, we'd get a whole lot more bang for the buck because they're free, they can focus, they can get some tasks completed,
Yeah.
which means we get to see some outcomes.
Exactly. The coolest thing I found about teams is when you start pulling these cross-functional teams together, the individuals on the teams have an experience. They have an experience of what it's like to create value through a cross-functional team. They have an experience to have empathy for the other guy's position and his challenges and pains that he's in the other part of that organization. And they also have an opportunity to learn. There's so much untapped knowledge in the organization because it sits in this fragmented world. So as we go through these temporal transformations, we actually collect evidence and we collect experience on cross-functional teams that says, hey, this might be a better way to do things. And that is the foundational component, I think, that will allow the organization to transform over time. That is the element, I believe, that starts to change culture, is to have this new experience that's something that's much more rewarding, being on an enabled team and getting something done and feeling good about that and having a customer at the end of that chain recognize it. So, and agile procurement is right at the core, that foundational component, if you like, of making that kind of transformation happen.
I think it's a core enabler.
Yeah.
I've encountered this in both government as well as corporate work where you hit this magic roadblock because the partner that you're working with, the contract has been written in the classic format, according to classic project philosophy. They're starting to get anxious because they can't unlock their first payment until the requirements are signed off.
Right.
And then because we're working in this novel way, the requirements, we know that they're going to change. So no one would be insane enough to actually commit to saying this is the requirements and they will not change. It's the foundational thesis is the requirements will develop as our knowledge emerges. So you end up with this challenging juxtaposition where your partner really needs some money to be able to keep paying people.
Right.
But they're blocked because the contract was written in a way that doesn't recognize this innovative, iterative, incremental approach. So you end up with people doing things, it's like, keeping those spare taxi receipts for you. I'm sure you've heard this from many people, that when you travel, you keep a couple of taxi receipts because if you spend money, you won't be able to expense that. But if you got a taxi receipt, they'll pay that, right?
Right.
Dave Snowden taught me that trick.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. The de-risking part of this is really significant because in the traditional approach, I mean, if you know everything up front, then it's not a complex project. If
Yep.
you know everything up front, it's a process. If you do it over and over again, well, it's really a process. It's not a project. But if you're doing a complex project and there's a whole bunch of unknowns, you don't know them. And then you do a single pass. In federal government, you do a single attempt through, we're going to write this thing, we're going to freeze the requirement. Your chances for success are pretty slim. I mean, almost impossible to get it right on a complex bid. And that's getting more difficult as time goes on. And AI is not going to address that. AI is good for looking backwards and pulling all the data together and saying, hey, here's what you got. But AI is not going to give you a forecast in the future. This is a people thing, and
Yeah.
it's people communication thing, and you de-risk. The whole Lean Agile Procurement thing does a whole huge benefit of de-risking initiatives by breaking them down into smaller pieces and by doing validation early according to Agile principles. So the legal part of that has to concede to that approach. And when it does, then the first thing we're doing on these things is doing validation immediately. So a winner's picked, and in the first 3 to 6 months, all of his evidence has to be put forward to say, I am creating value,
Yep.
and we are moving closer toward the intended outcome. And if we're not, we need a pivot. And at the end of the 3 to 6 months, I have an out. In the terms and conditions in the federal government, they have this thing called the SAC manual, the supply, I can't remember, supply arrangement. It's called, I think it's SACC, and it's huge document. It's been around forever. But the assumptions in the document are that we're going to enter into a 10-year contract. And we have to put the legal terms and conditions into that contract to try to mitigate risk around changes and around that we may not have got everything up front and that we're going to get locked in with the vendor. So all these things are really aggressive kind of terms that says with no trust at all.
Yeah.
And the system is just, in today's day and age, the system is completely just a non-starter.
And that's one of the challenges with traditional contracts is by nature of English, and Canada would have had the influence of French law as well, where you've got interesting systems because the French system is that you're guilty until proven innocent.
Yes.
The English is the other way around, and when you mush them two together, you're going to end up with some very adversarial contracts, and that's where we see punitive clauses, and it's not looking for the win-win. And
right.
in the interest of safety, they're putting all these clauses in, but that then generates some very risk-adverse behaviours of the partner, where they'll put in punitive terms for change requests and all things like that. And if procurement's based on getting the lowest bidder.
Yeah, I did my 10 years at IBM, and when we got the large bids, we pulled the bin, and the first thing we had to do was read the evaluation criteria, and we had to read it 5 times. And then we would come up with a term and condition or some term, term number 3.4.6.1, A, that said, you must blah, 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 guarantee, da, 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 da. And we go and have a chat with the paralegal because we go, geez, I don't think we're compliant with this one. And the paralegal would say, well, read the term again. And so we read it, and he'd come across one word like guarantee or something. Maybe it's a bad example, but come across one word like guarantee. He'd say, what was that word? Guarantee. Okay, what does that mean? And we'd have a 10 to 15 minute discussion about what guarantee could mean or what it might mean. And we would interpret it in such a way that we could be compliant. So that was number one. Number two is the evaluation criteria says, there's a dynamic portion of the bid. You must make so many. In the old days, in the IBM days, a mainframe bid we had to do tape mounts or provide tapes or something. There would be 10 tape mounts a day or something, and the evaluation criteria said you must provide 10 tape mounts a day, and you must provide the price for that. Okay, no problem. We go talk to our operations guys. Just how realistically, how many of those kind of actions would we need on a daily basis? Oh, well, for these guys, it's probably 200. So we go, okay, well, the first 10 are free. And 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 are going to be $1 million each. And not because we're nasty, but
You've got
because,
to make a profit, right?
well, our cost in the bid was 100,000 or 100 million or something, right? And, we had to bid at 80 just to get to the table, because the bid was a smorgasbord of all the top vendors, that wasn't needs based. And it was, again, we know everything up front, so this is exactly what we need, but they didn't know. And the tape mount thing, whatever, was a classic example. So that we'd make our money back on the 167%.
Yeah.
And IBM and some of the big players were very cognizant of this game. And that's why we had to go to the evaluation criteria first. So I want to bring it over. I want to talk to you about something that's new that's come up in the last few years, though. And that's the government's attempt to do agile procurement. So I presented at the political level in 2017 at a standing committee, which is an all political party, saying, you guys should really move to agile or start looking at it. Contracts shouldn't be bigger than 500,000, and they shouldn't go longer than a year. And so that you can have checkpoints and have some capability to manage these things a little better. And you should look at doing procurement through agile, and I introduced agile to an outcomes-based approach. So they went ahead and tried to do that. I wasn't engaged in the actual after implementation, and I just read a bid the other day, an actual bid that came out, saying it was an Agile 3.0 in the federal government. And the bid was 37 pages long. And there was one paragraph up front, a paragraph, that was the problem statement. And
Wow.
the other 37 and a half pages were the process. And in the problem statement, it said the solution must be AI. So it couldn't even in the problem statement say, we have this problem, can you fix it? It had to give the solution. So that was the first thing that jumped off the page. The second thing that jumped off the page is they have 4 waves of interactions with the vendor community, not the partner community. It's still vendor community. They have 4 waves of interaction with the vendor community, with this thing they call invitation to refine the requirement. So for 4 sessions with individual one-on-one workshops, they try to do workshops, which is good. I mean, I applaud them on trying to move the ball.
It's one step better, yeah.
So, but they had these, and what they did was they invited vendors in to say, is my requirement okay? And I'm going, well, wait a minute. Now, when I go to the store or I go to buy a car, I don't go ask the sales guy, what kind of car do you think I need? So this has been going on in kind of outcomes-based procurement attempts in public sector for some time, where they invite vendors in to say, is my requirement okay? And they really haven't done the legwork up front to say, what is my intended outcome? What's my problem, my intended outcome? What are my needs? What are my key needs? Have I got them prioritized? And do I have a roadmap like we do in LAP? None of that stuff has been done. So when they go to the vendor community, it's a failed initiative immediately, because they don't really understand what they're buying for. They don't understand how they're going to create value with this thing. So in LAP, as you know, we do the needs analysis workshop, which is cross-functional, including customers and users and stakeholders and people that do operations, so that we clearly understand the need. And as a buyer, I own the need.
Yeah.
I don't own the solution. I leave the solution to the vendor community, the partner community now, and I own the need. So don't tell me what I need. That's mine. And you know what? I won't tell you how to solution it. And that's the big kind of change that happens between traditional early attempts at Agile and what we're doing with LAP.
And the other thing that leapt out at me is the big room event that we use in LAP.
Yes.
Is super important, because it saves a whole lot of mess and drama, because you have all your potential partners in the room, and it does great things for transparency. It does great things for compliance, from risk management, from audit, and fairness, because you can't have a legal action saying, oh, we didn't understand or we didn't know about this bit of information you told the other vendor, because everyone's in the room.
Yes.
And you can get then a feeding of, sharing of minds. And the feedback I've had is the potential partners appreciate it because it's shorter. And like you're saying, like when you're working on IBM, you'd be working for months on a bid, and the cost of that is hundreds of thousands. So
exactly.
if we can reduce that time to prepare by using Lean Agile Procurement and getting everybody in the room, we're saving all of the potential partners a lot of money. Even if they're unsuccessful, their quid's in because their spend is less. And also because we're coming around again more frequently, they might be able to come in later. And Mirko's got some great stories where alliances are formed in the big room event, so that we're meeting all of this, we're saving time, and then we're getting cross-functional team from the company, but then we're getting better cross-coordination with our potential partners. And every very large organization I've worked with has always got multiple partners coming in. There will always be a number of the bigger vendors just for risk management in case one of them gets into trouble.
Yeah. In the government here, there's 350 plus policies in procurement, and they keep adding on stuff. But if you boil it down, the three big components are fair, open, and transparent. There would be vendors that would balk at sharing the big room altogether. But if you really want to be fair, open, and transparent, you have to give the same message to everyone at the same time. And like this meeting, all those meetings are recorded. So I have a full audit trail of everything that happened in the meeting. Another big risk in current state procurement is, well, we might get the bid contested after, and it might end up in a legal situation because there's a dispute over who won. Well, if you're all in the room together and we get to the final day and we say we're going to award it to partner B, and partner A raises his hand and says, I don't think it's fair. Well, then the question is, okay, well, why not? Seriously, I'd like to understand what it is that we missed. And the whole room's there to assess it. And if that vendor can make a case, then maybe we delve into that. Let's take some more time. Okay, if not, do you agree we're going to award it to vendor B? Well, I guess so. Okay, well then sign the form here, the disclaimer saying that you won't challenge the bid. So in the 7 or 8 years that we've had Lean Agile Procurement, we haven't had one challenge.
No.
Not one. I mean, imagine if just that alone, that creates in government work, that creates a whole other 2-3 years of effort. And again, that's where we start getting into these huge costs of legal disputes and having to pay vendors out after an award has been made to a contractor. Or the work is stopped because, we couldn't give it to A, we had to give it to B. And it just turns into a nightmare. So that's another huge deal where Lean Agile Procurement could really have an impact.
So we're talking about compliance, we're talking about transparency, we're also talking about potential challenges and risk mitigation of potential legal challenges that would further delay things. So we've got another factor coming in. And also in the big room, because we do multiple rounds where we have opportunities to improve your bid.
Right.
You're listening to what the other potential partners are saying, so you can incorporate that feedback. And so what we're looking for is a willingness to engage.
Yeah, and some vendors may say, well, I'm not going to engage in a big room event like that. And my position would be the government should say, okay, then you'll be excluded from the opportunity. See you next time. When I was at IBM, I had a team of 18 people working for 3 months just on the bid response. That wasn't on the 3 years of marketing beforehand. They had a senior VP for government and a whole sales marketing effort, including that, IBM Canada would have to invest in Canada We built a new lab in Montreal. We built a new this. We're investing in Canada. We're hiring people in Canada. So there's a whole political GR effort. All that stuff costs millions of dollars. Small medium enterprise not at the table. I'm a
With that,
small medium company. I've got very limited resources, but I got the best product in the world. The last place that I'm going to bring that is to the federal government, because I can't spend 4 months answering their bid for something that they've specified that, from my point of view, is obviously wrong. It won't create any value. I can see it right on the page. I don't even have time to read this because I'm doing so much business in the States, or I'm doing so much business in Germany or in other countries or in the UK, because my product is hot. It's going off the shelf. So those guys aren't even at the table. So with Lean Agile Procurement, what am I looking at? Maybe a 2-day engagement where I'm paid to show up, and they haven't specified the solution. I can go in and say, here's how I'm going to create value. And I'll be asked, well, how do you know that? Well, because we've just implemented it at this place. And by the way, these are the issues you're going to run into. This constraint, this constraint, and this constraint. And we ran into this and we did that. And the next vendor gets up, a huge, big player like an IBM, and says, well, we'll pull together our integration team and we'll try and figure out how to do this. So it's that kind of thing that you may see. And the other thing about all this recording and stuff is that it's completely, you can get in there with the auditors after. And if there's any issue, the Auditor General has all of the evidence they need. So it really is maybe a much better approach.
So what do your clients think? So I understand you're having conversations. Can you sense that there's an appetite for this?
If you talked to me a year ago, I would say there wasn't. But there has to be a compelling event for this because it's a big cultural shift. But I think there's a misread, even from our point of view, that we should be positioning this more as a foundational transformation engine to get organizations to start the transformation journey. But in addition, that we really got to do something. We need to be able to procure faster because the world's getting so dynamic that we need these are really becoming more compelling events as we go along. We can't ignore them anymore. And in the federal government, with the new prime minister and the new political regime that's in there, they are not going to. They're not going to miss. There's going to be very serious leadership impacts if outcomes aren't achieved. So I think that we're going to see some real movement now, and it's a great opportunity to bring this and other initiatives forward that can really leapfrog public sector. So hopefully we'll see that happen. I'm seeing a lot of activity now that I hadn't seen at all, and so it's going to be an interesting year, 2026.
No, that's good to hear.
Yeah,
that's good. So you think LAP has got some great opportunities. The world is certainly a much more dynamic environment. I think since 2020, the pace of change and the nature of change is more rapid, and the swings are, to me, larger.
Right.
So we need to be far more responsive and dynamic.
Yeah, it'll never be this slow again. We grab the day because it's never going to be this slow again, and it's never going to be, this less dynamic than it is going forward. It's going to continue to accelerate, especially with things like AI that are going to really disrupt a lot of stuff inside organizations, and organizations are going to have to move to a new structure. The hierarchical model is not going to work going forward. So Lean Agile Procurement offers you a couple of things. It offers you the capability to really start to execute faster. Your projects and your services are in a hurry up and wait mode. So you get to execute faster, but also you get to stick your toe in the water of transformation inside your organization. So my goal in 2026 is to implement LAP in the federal government someplace, collect evidence, and take that evidence and extrapolate it across to say, what if this was implemented at scale? Just indicatively off by 100% doesn't matter. the numbers are so huge, the bar is so low. There is enormous opportunity, and not just in Canada, but globally in public sector.
Yes, and private sector as well, but public sector, you can really see it slicing through things. I think the UK, we've got a huge opportunity because there's been a lot of effort to bring agility into the UK government, and there's references there. So I hope the same happens over here.
Yeah.
So what's up for you for the rest of the year? So we're currently recording in August 25. What's your plans until 26 when you're going to be
well, I'm going to be heads down on this stuff for this year for sure. I can see that, and I know that's going to happen. I've got some seminars coming up that I have to attend. One is on fraud in October, fraud in procurement. So there's a whole piece I'll do on that. And then there's a big government show called Forward 50, and they've asked me to keynote on that, which is very exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's in early November. So I'm got some work to do there. And then the other part is we got to implement this, and I got to collect some evidence inside the public sector, based and growing on the evidence that's already been collected over the last 7-8 years. So add one so that I have a local reference for this, and then take those numbers and, like I said, create the case for a scaled version of this.
Fantastic. And what's the best way for people to get a hold of you, Dan, if they want to have a chat? Or
get me through the Global Alliance, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Pretty easy to find. If you my company is Pathfind, but and so I'm sitting on the board with you on Lean Agile Procurement Alliance, and my focus for you guys, of course, is on public sector. So you can get me on LinkedIn, and anybody who wants to have a chat, I'm more than open to having, especially on this topic.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks very much for your time, Dan. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to have this discussion, and look forward to hearing of your adventures.
Okay. I'd love to circle back. I'll let you know how things go.
Excellent.